Hey there, spring is finally here and it feels absolutely incredible. The trees and the flowers are starting to pop, and we're just a few days after the spring equinox now. It's in late March, and I don't think we're done with our last frost for the season, but it does feel really good. There's a lot more daylight, things are growing very quickly. And so today I want to talk about crop planting. And I know this is not a perfectly timed video, and a lot of people are doing most of their crop planting in the winter time. And at this point, probably most of you have bought seeds, but I kind of want to talk about crop planting and adjustments that happen during the season. So first I'll start off with some general tips about crop planting. I want to talk about my crop plan and how it's changed over the last few months and how I'm dialing it in for my customers and my business. And then lastly, I want to talk about crop planting specifically for small scale farms, or suburban farms, urban farms, micro farms, whatever you want to call it. Let's first start by talking about crop planting in general. People have a wide variety of approaches to this, and I'm kind of in the middle in terms of really super detailed planned and no plan at all. I'm kind of in the middle, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But what I want to point out is that you need the crop plan for you, your farm, and your business. I think a lot of people out there are looking for a playbook, and it really doesn't exist because every farm, every business, and your market is going to be different. So you need to figure out what that is. And I think I fell into that trap early by trying to follow some playbooks that other people were using, and it didn't quite work here. So keep that in mind with all of this stuff. And it also depends on if you're selling to restaurants, CSAs, or farmers market, and they're all going to be kind of different. And I did a great video about how to make money from your farm. I talked about all those different sales outlets, so I'll leave a link down below and also at the end of the video. Now, if you're selling to restaurants, which I am, one big thing for me is having consistent product from week to week. And that's going to be super important, and getting your successions sorted out really well. If you're doing a CSA, you need a variety every week, but you have to consistently have a variety every week. So you have to have a lot of different items available every week. And if you're doing a farm stand or at a farmer's market, I think it's kind of a mixture of the two. You kind of want consistency for crops you're known for, and then you want to be able to switch it up throughout the seasons to keep people excited and coming back to your table. Now, one thing about consistency that's really hard with crop planting is planting out your successions. So for example, if I need lettuce every week, and let's say I can get 50 pounds out of a 50-foot bed, and I need 50 pounds every week to sell, then I got to plant one every week. So you just got to stay on top of it, and you got to stay way ahead of the game. And it's always good to have a little bit of extra. Now keep in mind with succession planting, a lot of people have questions about this, in that in the middle of the summer, if you plant things out 1 week apart, they'll come out 1 week apart. But if you plant in the spring, let's say 3 weeks apart, well, when you plant it out super early, those 3 weeks before you plant the next one is not getting as much sunlight as it does afterwards, and heat. So you might plant it 3 weeks apart, but as they get closer to harvest, they may only be 1 week apart. And similarly, at the end of the season, after you pass the summer equinox, it goes the other way. So you could plant something 1 week apart and it comes out 3 weeks apart, or longer if you're towards the fall and into the winter. So it's a little bit tricky, and I recommend that you try to keep notes and keep organized so that you know what works and what doesn't. And I'm not the best at keeping track of that, but you got to keep in mind that it's not always the same spacing in terms of planting and harvesting. I want to get into talking about my crop planting techniques and then the crop plan for the farm this year. As I said, I'm kind of in the middle between super planned and not planned at all. And so my main strategy that I've been using for the last few years, and by no means is it perfect and it could be better, but this is just what I've been doing. And I always tell you guys, this is what I do. Doesn't mean you should do this. But I like to give it as an example, and then I let you know what works and doesn't work. So I plan all of my transplants, all of the main crops I need to do. Because you have to start those ahead of time, I plan those out and make sure I have room for them. And then whatever else I have room for out here, I just direct seed. So I'll get into the more specific crops in a second, but that's essentially the pattern that I have, and it seems to be working okay. It gives me some flexibility if crops fail, if I have an extra bed, if something bolts and I have to take something out, I have an extra bed to plant. So have direct seeded crops on hand that you can fill in where you have time, because you can't catch up super quickly with transplants. A lot of people ask me about multi-cut, especially with lettuce and greens, because I grow a lot of that stuff. Unless it's in the winter time, I pretty much don't plan on a second cut for the most part. You might get a little bit lucky, but here it goes from like winter to summer so quickly that by the time things start growing quickly, they'll probably bolt really quickly or have insect pressure. So I tend to just, do one cut. If I can sneak a second cut, I will, but often like half the year I can only get one cut. So anything I get on that second is just bonus. And also keep in mind with second cuts is the yields are definitely less, and sometimes the quality can be less. And if you're really trying to focus on quality, you want to make sure that you're giving out the best quality possible. So what's the plan for this year? Well, as you guys know, I have 16 48, we'll just say 50-foot beds, and they're in these 2 caterpillar tunnels, and I'm selling only to restaurants. So I've had to whittle down my crop selection significantly, and I knew that was going to happen. So I kind of cast a wide net out there with my first round of crops. I'm already flipping beds and planting again, and it's only been farming for a few months here, which is crazy, but the tunnels and being in North Carolina helps that quite a bit. So I did have a lot of discussions with chefs about, hey, what do you guys want? And I thought it would be more like they would just tell me what they wanted and then I'd grow it, but it didn't quite work out that way. So I kind of had to grow a bunch of stuff and then throw it out there and say, hey, what do you guys want? And I now, after work with them for a few weeks, I'm getting a sense of what's going on. So lettuce is gonna be my main crop. I'm basically gonna plant that every week and be really consistent. I wanna make sure that all my accounts, if they want lettuce for a salad on their menu, that they have that every single week. So that's gonna be my main crop. And as I said before, I'm growing that Salanova foundation mix. And then I'm gonna be doing a lot of carrots, and so I'll probably have to plant those every few weeks or every month or so. And the good thing about them is I can store them too, so that's fantastic. And those are gonna be my two main crops. I'm gonna have one baby green, probably a brassica of some sort. I'll probably have to use insect netting in the summer. I might be a mix. I'm still playing around with that, but I think that's what a lot of the chefs that I'm working with are looking for. And what I'm good at doing is growing greens. So, you know, they like the lettuce, they like a lot of the baby greens, and a lot of them like, they've been buying all the stuff I've been growing and mixing them together. So that's gonna be my main push, and that's gonna take up most of my beds. I'll have probably 4 beds for seasonal crops. So I think I've said this before, but I'm gonna do some patty pan just in the springtime, just a short burst, and then in the summer I'll have some of those Italian sweet peppers, which I mentioned from Osborne, and some cucumbers, and that'll be it. And then I'm not sure about the fall yet. So very small seasonal selection, and then making sure I focus on the greens, make sure I'm consistent with my customers and that sort of thing. So I have to be really careful with my beds because I only have so many. I got to keep them really full and really productive. And I got a bunch of things to talk to you about that. As I mentioned, transplants are a huge part of the crop planning and for the success of the farm, and it's something that I've put a lot more emphasis on this year than I have in the past 3 years. I have a nursery now, which is fantastic, but in the last 3 years I've been growing under lights, trying to harden them off. Last year I was driving them down to Raleigh City Farm, and I think, you know, my transplant game wasn't up to par, and I think taking the time and resources and energy and learning how to get better at this is a huge advantage. And the big thing here is that, you know, for me, because my farm's so small, all my transplants have to work well, and work quickly. And so I don't want to be wasting time by starting trays, transplanting them out, fertilizing, irrigating, like all the stuff that I have to do to get a crop to the point where it's going to harvest. And so putting a really strong transplant out in the field helps in all those ways. It doesn't struggle as much, it grows faster, it gets to harvest quicker, and usually the yields are better. So I think it's really important to spend time on getting your transplant game up to par. And one thing that gets overlooked a lot, I think, is the quality of your potting mix. And I usually try to tell people buy like the best thing you can possibly get. And I know that's hard in a lot of places, but one thing is you get strong transplants. That's the first thing. But secondly, when these go in the ground in the field, whatever's in the potting mix kind of acts as an amendment too. So if there's micronutrients and minerals and things like that, those actually get put in the ground. So it's not just potting mix, there's a lot more to it. And so with that in mind, I want to talk about today's show's sponsor, which is Tilth Soil, and new sponsor for the channel, but they're an amazing company, very cool. They're in Cleveland, Ohio, and the thing that makes them very different from a lot of other companies is that they're compost-based soil company, and they collect food waste from the Northeast Ohio and produce biologically active compost and then biologically active soil. So I really recommend that you check them out. They're kind of in that same style as Vermont compost, and actually their stuff's been tested against it and done really well. So they're now increasing their production and distribution. So, you know, if you're in Ohio, go check them out. If you're outside of Ohio and you're interested, you can order through their website, but as you would expect, shipping soil is expensive. So find a local retailer near you and ask them to reach out to Tilth Soil if you're interested in getting some. Maybe they can work it out. But really excited about them sponsoring the channel here, and really excited to share the work that they're doing. It's going to be really cool. Another huge advantage of doing a lot of transplants is that you get a much higher yield in the field. All the plants that you start ahead of time that get put out as transplants, they've had weeks of growing before they get in the field, so they have a head start. You could be growing another whole crop in that bed before this crop goes out there. So you basically get maybe almost twice the output, which is fantastic. And the other benefit too is that you're putting out only really strong plants. So you pick the best plants that you've grown and you put those out, so you get a really strong stand out in the field. Another thing that you know, you want to make sure that your successful with each crop that you're growing. And I think that takes a lot of practice. Every crop is different, but by whittling it down to the crops that you want to focus on, you get better at them. One example is beets. I've had a lot of trouble direct seeding beets. I think a lot of farmers have. I'm just going to go to transplants now, and it's a little bit more work, but I will make sure that I get a yield out of it. And so a lot of those kinds of things. Interplanting is also big for me this year, and I think I'm finally at the point where I'm comfortable enough to do that based on, you know, having more experience with each crop and getting the timing right. I think that's tricky. So some of the interplants that I'm going to be working on will be green onions and lettuce. I'm going to be working on that interplant. Another one is right here. This is going to be the Italian sweet peppers with beets on the side. And so especially with a lot of the taller growing crops, you can often sneak at a quick growing crop along the sides of it before the main crop comes up. Like tomatoes and cucumbers, you could probably sneak in a quick crop underneath and get another half a bed of production or so. So that's also really fantastic. Just a few more points I want to make before wrapping it up. Make sure you focus on your timing. Make sure that when the transplants need to go out, you have a bed ready for them. Make sure that you're not leaving beds empty, those sorts of things. And take notes, learn from each crop each year, and you'll get better at them. And you'll learn each crop so you understand when they need to go in the ground, and that's super important. Another thing is to not experiment too much. Experiment a little bit. You know, when I farm this small, I don't really have a lot of wiggle room for that. And I think growing on such small acreage and trying to get consistent growth and sales is tricky because I don't have that much room for experimenting. And I think this is a little bit harder in that regard. But making sure you're keeping your beds full is super important, and make sure that you're flexible with your crop plan. And I think my strategy of planting some things and leaving some things flexible is super important, because as I get feedback from my customers or realize, hey, I really want to grow this thing, but no one's buying it, I got to switch gears. I got to make sure I'm getting the most output, the most sales per bed, per square foot, that kind of stuff. So plan your transplants, have some direct seeded crops available. For me, it's going to be carrots and baby greens as my sort of flexible crops, and I'm going to be focusing on lettuce and a couple of seasonal things. And that's kind of how I'm doing it this year and how I'm going to make it work. And hopefully this was helpful for you guys. A lot of things to help you guys get your crop plan sorted out. This is what's working for me in my context, and hopefully it might be a good takeaway or two from this for you and your smaller farms or maybe your larger farms. Again, big thanks to Tilth Soil. Check out their links down below. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Please hit subscribe if you're not already, and we'll see you in the next one.